Let's dive right in. We're going to break down how this shadow war between the US and Iran is being fought. And no, not just with drones and warships, but on a battlefield that's a lot closer to home for all of us, the American economy.
So you might be asking yourself, why does a flare-up in the Middle East seem to hit my wallet almost instantly? It's a great question. You see a headline, and a few days later, bam, you feel it at the gas pump. And look, that connection? It's not a coincidence. It is a direct, lightning-fast chain reaction, and it all boils down to how global markets price in one very powerful human emotion: fear.
The main way this whole conflict really gets its hooks into your finances is through something Wall Street pros call the fear premium. Now, the key thing to get here is that this isn't about an actual shortage of oil right now. It's about the risk of a future shortage. It is literally fear, priced in dollars and cents.
Let's unpack that. When a drone strike hits or a tanker is attacked, the oil market isn't reacting to oil that's been lost. Not really. It's reacting to what could be lost. Traders are basically placing bets on what might happen next, that the conflict could spiral, get bigger, and really choke off the flow of oil. That bet on future risk, that's the fear premium right there in action.
You know, this whole process follows a pretty predictable script. First, you get the event, an attack on a ship, let's say. The market reacts instantly, and I mean oil prices can jump 5, maybe even 10% in just a few hours. But then, if the response is measured, if things don't escalate into all-out war, that fear starts to fade. The premium evaporates, and prices drift back down. It's just this constant nerve-wracking cycle of spike and cool down.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. Just look at what's been happening with the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. By forcing these massive oil and gas tankers to skip the Suez Canal and take the long, long way around Africa, they're adding up to 2 weeks to their journeys. That means way more fuel burned, higher shipping costs for everybody, and very real, sustained pressure on the entire global economy.
Now, whenever we talk about oil prices and conflict in the Middle East, it's so easy to picture those grainy images from the 1970s oil crisis, right? Long gas lines, rationing. But it is absolutely critical to understand that today's world is fundamentally different, and I'm going to show you why.
Okay, so the whole dynamic has completely flipped on its head. It's gone from dependence to deterrence. Back in the 70s, the US was incredibly vulnerable, totally dependent on imports. Fast forward to today, and America is the world's #1 oil producer. We're a net exporter, so an OPEC embargo, it just couldn't happen in the same way. Plus, you've got key Gulf states that are now aligned with the US, and we have these huge strategic reserves to soften any short-term blow.
And the numbers? Well, they tell the story loud and clear. U.S. oil production has skyrocketed from about 9.2 million barrels a day in 1973 to over 13 million today. This energy independence is basically our get-out-of-jail-free card against a 1970s-style meltdown. But, and this is a huge but, it doesn't make us immune to the new economic threat.
And this is the pivot. This is the whole ballgame right here. While our society isn't going to grind to a halt like it did back then, the core economic danger is exactly the same as it was 50 years ago. Why? Because volatile energy prices are like rocket fuel for inflation. And that brings us to the real modern threat of this conflict.
So this isn't a story about gas lines anymore. It's a story about interest rates. The true economic damage from this shadow war is how it basically handcuffs the Federal Reserve, trapping our economy in what you could call an inflation lock.
Here's how it works. Every single time the conflict causes one of those incident spikes in oil prices, it pushes up inflation here at home. So the Federal Reserve, whose main job is to keep inflation under control, they see this happening and they basically have no choice. They have to keep interest rates high to cool everything down. Any talk of cutting rates, it gets pushed off the table.
So what does that higher for longer rate policy actually mean for you? Well, it means mortgage rates stay painfully high, which puts a chokehold on the housing market. It means businesses find it way more expensive to borrow money, so they invest less and they hire fewer people. Essentially, the entire US economy gets locked into this state of slow growth. And that's a tough environment for everybody. It can mean a tougher job market, stagnant 401ks, all while the risk of a full-blown recession gets bigger and bigger.
But the impact doesn't stop with the Fed. Oh no. The conflict creates all these other more hidden costs that just act as a continuous, quiet drain on the American economy, and ultimately on the taxpayer.
Hey, remember those ships we talked about going all the way around Africa? Well, that doesn't just affect oil tankers. It affects those giant container ships carrying, well, Everything. Your new phone, car parts, even food. Those increased shipping costs, they get passed directly to us, the consumers, creating yet another source of inflation that has nothing to do with the price of gas.
And then there's the direct military cost. I mean, keeping a massive U.S. naval and air presence in the region to keep shipping lanes open and deter attacks is incredibly expensive. And this isn't a one-and-done expense. It is a constant, multi-billion-dollar operating cost that's just always running in the background.
To make this real, just think about this number for a second. A single missile interceptor, the kind the U.S. Navy fires to shoot down incoming threats, can cost up to $2 million for one shot. Now compare that $2 million to the cost of the thing it's shooting down, a drone that might have cost as little as $20,000 to build. That, right there, is what's known as asymmetric warfare. We're spending 100 times more to defend than the other side is spending to attack. The economic imbalance is it's staggering.
And every single one of those $2 million interceptors gets added to the national debt. This conflict isn't just a news headline, it's a permanent line item on the U.S. budget. It's a fiscal drain that every single American taxpayer ultimately helps to pay for, whether we realize it or not. All of which leaves us with a final and pretty heavy question. We can see the price at the pump. We can feel the high interest rates. We can calculate the defense spending. But in a modern shadow war, fought with economic pressure and expensive deterrence, what are the long-term, invisible costs that we haven't even begun to see yet?